from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
Another Veteran November episode, folks. I hope you are ready and tuning in. Happy Thanksgiving for those that are tuning in on this lovely holiday week of Thanksgiving. We're recording on Election Day, so we're going to wish Happy Thanksgiving now. And we all hope to be thankful for no political ads. I think that's going to be the number one thing said on TV. Before we get started on today's awesome episode for Veteran November, please make sure you subscribe to our podcast right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button right below here and turn on the notification bell so every day at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time you get a brand new episode of Veteran November. You also get all of our other amazing, great, unique, amazing, unbelievable content. You know you want to do that. You can find all of our information on cyberhubpodcast.com. And without further ado, joining me on today's episode is my friend Stephen Semmelroth, VP Cyber. What's up, Stephen?
I'm having a wonderful day, but it is the early morning of Election Day, so I hope everybody else has a wonderful day, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, the reason, I did Veteran November partially is because we've become so intertwined in politics, we've forgotten our service. And I think it's time that we all kind of look at that. And, being that I'm letting people know we're recording this on Election Day, I posted something this morning and it's got everyone who's been on the show or this picture on there. And it's a great, diverse group of people who are patriots, who are Americans, who want to serve their community, want to serve others, and now they serve in the Infosec community.
Absolutely. So I'm sure we'll get into this, but it's really fun to watch the security fundamentals that we have from a different perspective and different implementation and the frameworks and how those apply to the technology down the road, and to go back and to talk to guys like you and other people that have made that transition and see what it looks like on the outside, and understand that, oh yeah, all of those fundamentals that we learned so long ago still apply. To just have that reiterated back to us, through you and the other people on the podcast this month has been really fun to listen to. And it's always a challenge to go back and go, okay, no matter how good I happen to be, which is up for debate, obviously, all the time, there are definitely people that are way better than me. They've got the fundamentals down locked in, and to go back and bounce ideas back and forth makes all of us better. And that discourse is wonderful. So thank you for what you're doing. And I'll step back and give it back to you.
Well, so no, I love what you just said. And yes, it's been a diverse group, right? Like, I know we're recording and it's November 3rd and people are going to be like, well, how do you know, James? Well, I've been recording since October. I've been planning this since September, and I've spoken to like 48 people, and I had 40 say we'd love to come on. I've had several who they're big name CISOs who wanted to come on, and their PR and legal wouldn't let them because of the election, right? Because of the polarization. Like, I've had a few PR firms that say, hey, we're not doing any speaking engagements in November because of the election. And I'm like, well, we're not talking about politics. We're talking about InfoSec and veterans. But even that's become a little taboo, which is kind of a thing. But speaking of 40 people, all kinds of different backgrounds, people who've come from combat and people who've come from Intel and Signal and Air Force, those guys, and the Navy, Arab, Muslim, Jewish, like literally I had all
all the things,
everything, like north, south, east, west, women, men. It's all here, folks. It's this is our country, and this is what makes us great. So, Stephen, enough about that. Let's talk a little bit about you, man. What branch of the military did you serve in? How long were you in for? And what did you do?
Oh, well, we could spend about 13 seconds talking about that. So I was Army, and I did about 8 years active duty post-commissioning. Was one of the dirty officers. So for our listeners out there, listen to my words and hate me for the things I say, not for the things that I did. And I was predominantly infantry for most of that time. Afghanistan deployment, Ranger School, all that sort of stuff. And then I'd had some security stuff before I was in the military, and we got back from deployment, got a second unit and a couple other things, and realized that finally got the right x-rays, found out I'd broken my back. And so I thought, maybe the infantry is not the place for me, right? Literal weak spine. And that's the point when the Army Cyber Corps was standing up. So I switched over to the Cyber Corps. I got picked up, went down to Augusta, not too far from you, and I know you know it well. And spent a few years there. Got to do some interesting things, and got to leave and have a hand writing some of the doctrine about how cyber protection teams, build out their ability to protect strategic assets across the U.S., how they train to do that, and then how they defend. So, kind of a interesting path, one that I did not expect to take by any means, but it's where I ended up, and I had a lot of fun and met a lot of really interesting people throughout that journey.
So we'll get to Augusta in just a minute. I like the fact, and I think something here to a lot of people who might be listening, who might have been injured while they're in the service, who are considering a medical discharge. This transition to the Cyber Corps is unbelievable because, while, you still have some PT requirements. I know that they're lowering those PT requirements now because they want to recruit people who are computer smart, and not everyone looks as handsome as Stefan does, right? Like, it's not everyone is 5 foot, 6'1", 180 pounds. There are very smart computer people who could never do the 2-mile run or the PT requirements, but could be an asset to the military. And I know there are discussions right now around kind of those PT requirements within the Infosec world of kind of adjusting those or whatnot. And I hope that happens, because then people within the service who are heading to a medical discharge might stay in and make a career out of it in Infosec.
Absolutely. And, from coming from the infantry side of the house, where you carry heavy things far and do it quickly, to the Infosec side of the house, it's kind of hard. And there's some cognitive dissonance in there, even internally, of what is it that we need to do and how do we need to do that, and what's the profile that we're looking at. And the answer is all of the above, right? We have to have a diverse force. We have to have, the guys that can put on 150 pounds and walk up a mountain. And then we have to have the guys that can support them, because they're all one team, and all of that fight goes into the same thing in order to have outcomes that drive security. And as we move forward, the percentage of what that mix looks like inside the cyber force, of course, strategically and operationally will change, but including more people that would otherwise have to get pushed out, I think is strategically, from a manpower perspective, something that we should really look at as a defense force. And I'm glad that it is being looked at with a fine-tooth comb.
Well, it should be. Our troops and Infosec are one of the same. And what used to be, human intel operations are now cyber intel operations that save American lives. And so there's no weight limit, height limit, or PT requirements to save an American life. I always say to save an American life, irregardless of how it comes in what form or factor, is just as important. Let me ask you this, though. So you went to Fort Gordon, and it was right at the very beginning of really white lawn in Fort Gordon. It was right when, at the time, General Nakasone was making those investments in U.S. Army Cyber, moving from Fort Meade to Fort Gordon, spreading it out outside of San Antonio. What was it like to be in a place where it was just getting started? There was the whole thing of this is all new and crazy, to the state of Georgia really adopting Fort Gordon. I mean, at the time, Governor Deal invested over $100 million in building the Georgia Cyber Center. A lot of active economic developments, and kind of Augusta went from a city that was busy 10 days a year for the Masters to having a very high active military presence that really they weren't used to before. What was that like for you?
Oh, so there were a lot of really interesting both opportunities and challenges with that. And if you look from like the infrastructure side of the house of just what kind of Augusta is, it used to be surrounded by the Masters and Fort Gordon and kind of a downtown, to what it is today are two very, very different things. And that progression, that evolution is something that has been really interesting and fun to not just watch, but also live through while I was still there. And going through from an organizational standpoint of trying to define what the objectives are, how do we get to those objectives for security, and then getting the talent aligned with all of those aspects and building it out and scaling. And like any organization, scaling those outcomes is incredibly challenging. So, all the way down to the rubrics of what people learn when they come into a new type of unit. What are the outcomes that you have to know? Getting back to security and fundamentals, do we start with, Nmap and, connecting to a port, or do we start with what the threat looks like and then backwards plan all of that macro down to what the technological inputs are, so that way we can build the knowledge and the skills and the abilities inside of an overall framework, train people up, and then get them deployed in a way with often early on with organizations that didn't understand what we did. So there was an incredible amount of stakeholder engagement to get commitment from the units that we were supporting to even play ball. And by the time you wrap all of that together, it was a pretty fun challenge. It was a tough challenge. And there's a lot of people with scar tissue that fought the good fights to bring it to where it is now, because not everybody had the same vision coming into it, and getting all of that talent motivated in one direction and empowering towards the objective of defending the U.S. strategic assets across a number of boundaries was a whole lot of fun, super challenging, and it will continue to be ongoing because within the domain, the cyber domain, it's, change is why we exist. And if it's not for change and embracing it and being a leader and saying this is where we need to go next, we would still be losing those battles. And I think we're winning. I was not the first. I was in the second cohort of officers that got picked up for the cyber branch. So almost the beginning.
Well, almost is good enough, man. That the first cohort and the second cohort pretty much defined what it is today, I think. So as let's talk a little bit about your transition into civilian life from the military. So, being in Augusta, which is a city that's defined by Fort Gordon and Gulf, and kind of having a transition into the civilian life. What was that like for you?
So, everybody has their own use case in what it looks like. And to kind of frame my transition a little bit, my wife was active duty as well. So when I got medically retired, my wife was still in, ironically, the medical corps. She's an Army Nurse Corps officer. So my final PCS was actually PCSing to her duty station. So we were still tied in from that. And I became the Army spouse for a few years. And she actually just exited the military in August. So we're kind of reliving that transition now and seeing how I get a chance to coach her through it. So there's that piece that for me was kind of a phased exit because we're dual military. And then also, going through reconstructive back surgery, I didn't know if the Army was going to retain me, period. And because of that, I did a couple master's degrees because the veterans grants were great. And the last one that I did while I was still in, which I actually finished after I got out, and I'd had thankfully that base to move forward, was focused. So usually you go through an MBA and you come out having lost money. I went through an MBA and said, hey, I've got this idea for a new business. And I was able to talk with my classmates, and for all of our projects and deliverables that we had, I convinced them to use my idea as our homework, as our case studies. And so I ended up coming out what I think to be ahead by having all that free consulting and all that labor of love from my classmates, because we needed to work on something. So there's that transition as well. And then when I got out, I did start a company. So I founded a veteran-focused cyber recruiting company. And and I've never done HR. I was never, in the one shops for you military people understand what that HR side of the house is. I'm not an HR professional. I'm not a recruiter, but darn it, I can read books. I can do some analysis. I understand what threats are. I can align all of that up. I can, convince a few people that they should at least try to find a job through me, and then go out and talk to clients and educate them on what it is that veterans bring to the table and align those two and make some sort of a profit. And I did that through substantial pain. And when you combine all of that together, I think my wife being military and kind of having that phased output in transition, and then being able to have something that I could dive deep into, fully into, to start a business, get it built, get it off the ground, and then try to scale it. I had that plan going forward, and the plan itself was just you build a plan, you put a target, and you execute. Gee, it sounds like what we used to do every day. And then there's those points, and I still try to, as I'm coaching veterans, I try to talk about the points that they're going to struggle with, or at least be able to have an allegory for the times when I struggled as I transitioned. And for me, there were kind of like 3 major milestones. The first one, when the Army said, we are not going to retain you. Okay, that's kind of the smallest one. That's just a piece of information. I've got some time. I can play with that. I can come to terms with that. Fine. The second piece, when you finally sign out and you drive away, no matter what emotions you have, you will have emotions when you drive off. You might be turning around, pissed off and upset. You might, park the car at the gate and cry before you leave. You might leave and then turn around and go, do I go back? Am I going to make it out here? What am I going to do? And that's the second piece. But really the hardest part, I think, is usually for most people that I talk to, it's that 3 to 6 months after they're out. The honeymoon phase is over. They probably are locked into their new job. They're probably just getting to that point where they're trying to scale whatever that new context is of what their profession is that they're doing. And they're realizing that, the context and the lingo are different, and the relationships are different. And sometimes you can, but usually you can't just kind of look across the office and make eye contact with somebody where you communicate, let's go to lunch and this is where we're going, with one look, because you're so fully on the page. And you don't have those intimate shared experiences that you have with somebody else at that point. And that's usually when people start to crack a little bit and wonder if they made their good decisions at 3 to 6 month mark. So, that's certainly when I struggled, because at that point for me, that like 3 to 6 months was the make or break for my company. I had a few placements, running into cash flow issues. Am I going to get paid? Am I going to launch this thing? Thankfully, my wife was still working, so I had some more of a safety net. And, can I build this? Can I sustain this? What am I going to do? I only have so much control because my wife is still in the military. If I'm going to pivot, how am I going to pivot out of this? That kind of, you don't have a loss of sense of self, but you have a loss of a sense of the overall macro level of where you fit. And there's some loss with that. There's some grieving, there's some pain, but also there's some grit that you have internally that you're gonna put up. You're gonna step to the plate. You're gonna crush it. You're gonna move forward, and you're gonna succeed. And thankfully, I did. But I try to share those experiences about those struggles, because they are real. And if it's not, as you're driving out the gate or 3 to 6 months later, it will be another point when you turn around and you see a meme that you're like, oh man, that's hilarious. It's just, wait, nobody understands that around me. And whoa, now I gotta take an early lunch. So yeah, it's it certainly is tough, but all of the things that we are good at, all of those things apply. And what I've found is, outside of the military in that context, many of my candidates get hired to fill a need and fill a gap. But usually within 6 months, they've not just filled that gap, they've changed the organizational structure of the company that they're looking at. They've solved 3 to 4 different problems through onboarding. They've already onboarded somebody else at their company, and they've probably identified either a new market that they need to move into, they've closed the gap on a competitor, or they've driven some other ROI that the company did not expect because those were outside of the scope of their responsibilities, and they did them anyway because they want to win. Long answer.
It's an important answer, a very important one. When you talk about your transition, you talk about the moment you drive off. And I think for a lot of people, that moment they drive off is it's a mixture of emotions, right? And it's very interesting to talk about that on election day as we're recording this, because, if you, I've decided that I'm not getting on social media today. And
a wise decision.
And in my morning practitioner brief, in fact, I thanked LinkedIn personally. And I said, thank you, LinkedIn, for not letting out political ads on your platform, for really, for all the people who did post politics that never showed up in my feed, which was magnificent, because I know some people did, but it was never in my feed. And it was the one social media network where I felt safe in the last 6 months leading up to this election. Whereas then you go into these other networks, you kind of, you get sucked into it. And we talk about that emotional aspect of driving off. And that's exactly what a lot of people feel. November is a very weird month. And if we look at this month, we can break down November with, okay, this year's an election year. Every 2 years, it's an election year. Every 2 years, we have some sort of election in November. So we typically start the month heated, wondering our political features, letting 537 people try to think that they're gonna I always try to remind people that we vote as a nation for 537 individuals. That's it. That's all we vote for. And so on a national federal level, right, on a local level, you vote for about an additional 10, maybe 12, depending on the build out of your locality. And so we're covered with that. And then Veterans Day is a week later. And that's a day where we feel good and patriotic. And then about a week and a half after that is Thanksgiving. It's the day where we give thanks as a nation, right? We're thankful. And it's a roller coaster of emotions, right? Like, people who are very passionate about politics are very passionate on November 3rd, right? And then you try to find the gratefulness, the greatness of our nation, the greatness of our people. And that kind of starts to show on Veterans Day. But it really is highlighted in Thanksgiving when families get together and we're around the table. And for as long as I can remember now, I've been out 16 years. I've always got extra chairs at Thanksgiving. Those extra chairs are the people who didn't make it home for Thanksgiving, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's critical as important when we talk about this and we talk about transitioning out of the military. We have to be grateful that we had the opportunity to serve in the greatest military in the world, serving the greatest nation in the world, protecting the greatest people of the world, regardless of who they vote for, where they come from, whether they're brand new immigrants into our nation or people that have been here since the inception of our great nation. Everyone has a role to play in this American story. And we know that from our service. You and I have served with people who were first generation Asian Americans or people who've family escaped Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Sudan, Eritrea, Rwanda, places where they were having genocide. European Americans, we don't talk about them very often, but people that have migrated here from England, from Ireland. Chris Roberts, you know what I mean? A great example in our community of someone who immigrated to our nation. Eddie Doyle over at Checkpoint, another guy who immigrated to our nation. European that have come here and made America their home and picked this nation to live out their life and raise their families. And so when we talk about that moment of walking off, that emotion, I try to remind people when you're going through that emotion, just be grateful for the fact that you had the opportunity to serve your nation, and just look ahead and realize that when you're going into InfoSec, you're going into a greater mission. That greater mission of serving now American organizations and companies and defending them from foreign or domestic terrorists that are trying to impact them as well. So let's talk a little bit about, we talked about how you got into InfoSec. We talked a little bit about your transition. Let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurship. And we're almost out of time. I'm trying to put these at 30 minutes, but we're going to go over, folks. So just bear with us. We'll try not to go over too long, but what's really unique here is you went into entrepreneurship. So talk a little bit about that entrepreneurship that zest that kind of pushed you to kind of go and do your own thing.
Oh, yeah. So, gosh, I think if I go back, really go back, I kind of had that spark my whole life, and I didn't fully know or understand or appreciate it early on. And the first distinct memory that I have about entrepreneurship that I'll share with is I was doing menu design for my lemonade stand outside of the house for 4th of July.
Yes.
And when I say menu design, I literally was like, I called it Garfield's Lemonade Stand, and I put a picture of Garfield on the top, and I had the number one item on my lemonade stand was lasagna. And that's when I learned about intellectual property rights, because my mom sat me down and told me I couldn't have Garfield on the menu. So, kind of taking that to the logical end, why did I choose to go to a military academy? Because it was probably in my mind at that point the hardest thing I could do. Why did I choose to go into the infantry and go to Ranger School and pursue a deployment to Afghanistan? Because it was the hardest thing I could potentially do. Why did I decide to start a company in an area that I knew nothing about, in a market that I knew nothing about, in a product that I knew nothing about except the people? I knew the people were amazing because it was a darn hard thing to do. And I like those challenges. I relish in those. And, as we progress in our own careers, et cetera, picking the next thing that is a challenge is incredibly, obviously challenging because it's in the word, but it's also incredibly rewarding to see some sort of scope change in your life and drive towards something else that didn't exist before and create something is, to me, intrinsically rewarding and a whole lot of fun. And if you can do that and align some dollars with it, it's awesome. But I tell you what, 6 months in, when you've got the placements and you're waiting for the cash to come through and you don't know if you can make it, and you're just hoping that one of your clients pays their bill early so you can keep going, and then it happens and you win, you're like, okay, now it's game on. Now we're going to compete. And then you scale. It's obviously I'm a little competitive.
No, you don't say.
But it's also a lot of fun, and if you can do it and you can meet a need, and when I sat down and I kind of did that like big brain thinking of what is it that I really want to do, other than a hard thing, and I wrote the mission statement of the company. I said that effectively, I'll paraphrase here, but every word in that mission was important. Every word in the vision was important, and part of the mission, what I specifically said is I will not actively recruit people to try to convince them to leave the military, because I want the CMF to win, the Cyber Mission Force. I want our defense teams to win. So that means that if somebody wants to have that conversation and try to compare and see, well, what would life be like after, I'll have that. But I try to step back and really restrict what those concepts are. And then, entrepreneurship is a challenge, and you have to have an inherent amount of hustle to succeed. So I was coaching, a kid, a young man who's about to graduate college from one of the many military academies. And he goes, and for him, he's going to be potentially going to the reserves. And he said, Stephen, I think I want to start a company. What do I need to do? And I said, well, tell me about some of the things you do. And he goes, well, Stephen, for our senior project, I knew the one that I wanted to work on, but I also knew that cross-disciplinary teams are where it's what we needed in order to win at this competition for our capstone project, international capstone. And I said, okay, that's great. What did you do? And he goes, well, I went out and I found the mechanical engineering department. I spoke with their head, and I found these 3 other departments that I knew going to be inherent to our success. And I convinced them to not only align some of their capstone credits against my project that I was building, I convinced them to align actual college credit for those in order to make sure that the students would have some incentive to come and join me. And then all of that lines up to, helping them graduate instead of just being on a project and in a competition. So that's hustle, man. That is hustle. You do that, like you found stakeholders, you engaged them, you convinced them of something, you built a plan, you built a product, you got your supply side, you aligned it with the outcomes, and he's in the finals right now to potentially win this capstone. So yeah, you've got the skills, go out and do it. And it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be tough. But if you're willing to put in the hours and you've got a good plan, you can execute, game on.
Yeah, the hours. The hours of entrepreneurship are 24/7, 365, and there's a price. There's a price. I'm a firm believer that I think if we open the door for more veterans and more people who are discharged to go down the entrepreneur route, we've never seen an economic boom like we would see from veterans running businesses. There's a level of discipline, hard work, commitment, and also integrity. And integrity is so important in business and so often overlooked. There's a saying in Hebrew, and I'm going to say it in Hebrew and then I'll explain it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Adif Shem Tov me'asher Shemen Tov. So it means it's better to have a good name than good oil.
Accurate.
Your reputation is everything. And if you have good oil but you got a bad reputation, well, then people may go for a lesser quality oil, but a better reputation. People do business with people. People enjoy. People work with people. People do business with people. People interact with people they love, right? People they appreciate. And passion says it all. And when you talk, you're passionate, man. You are. It's addicting. It's like the energy's all over the place. It's like like containing myself here today. And like I've been meditating all day, trying to keep my emotions. Being that it's election day, and being that apparently our nation is going to go to doom tonight, depending on who you ask. But I'll tell you what. Depending who you ask, no matter what they say, we can all agree to one thing: everything's going to hell tonight. We can agree on one thing, not who's going to win, that no matter who wins, everything's going to hell tonight, right? And so I say that it's good to have passion, and it's good to kind of keep things mellow and just go with it. So as we wrap up here, and I don't want to wrap this up, I want to talk to you for like another hour, but I can't.
We'll do another session sometime.
We'll have to do one. And I think we'll have to do something more live and get more people to interact with us. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Maybe do like a veterans podcast towards the end of this month, and do it kind of live and bring some of our guests and yourself included, and kind of get together on a live platform and have a fun conversation. So what's one thing you loved about your military service?
Oh, camaraderie. Boom, number one.
Wins again. Like everyone asked that question too. It's like the same answer. I had some people at travel, and I'm like, you've apparently gone to Germany and like Korea, because
some experiences may vary.
Yeah, some experiences may vary. Travel, Afghanistan. I have a theory about when God created Earth. There's a very, my wife's Israeli, and so we watch a lot of Israeli TV. And Israeli comedy is really freaking hilarious because it's no holds bar. They have a show, and it's essentially a satire comedy show, and it's about the entire Old Testament and the current state of Israel and Jews since the beginning of Jewry. And they have very funny they take little biblical skits, right? Like, the 10 Commandments. And Moses' wife comes up to him and she goes, "You should add something there." And he goes, "What?" And she goes, "Do not rape." He goes, "Go now, tell all the people, do not rape." right?
No, it's hard.
Right? And she's like, you got to add it to the 10 Commandments. And so, it's a funny skit where, Moses is trying to explain to Israelites, oh, by the way, do not rape. Well, do you mean like do not rape in the morning, at night? Like what's rape? What's considered rape? And like the whole debate around rape. And they've made it into a very kind of satire way of going like, why didn't we have do not rape in the 10 Commandments? A great question.
Can you imagine if those questions that they asked on the comedy skit had been, legitimate questions thousands of years ago, where we might be as a people if that had happened?
So I actually went to a rabbi and I asked him that. And I said, why isn't there do not rape in the 10 Commandments? And he goes, well, what about don't covet your neighbor's wife? Wouldn't that apply to do not rape?
Yeah, it's too intellectual. Let's get it down to the masses.
You would think so. Do not murder, we still do it anyways. Do not steal, we still do it anyways. I mean, it's one of those where it's a very curious, but they do like really funny satire, and they have one about, the military, because everyone in Israel does military. And it's fascinating to see them talk about the camaraderie, the brotherhood that you build in the service, and the skills that you develop from it, and the different backgrounds, and when you drive off, you're emotional. And I'm going to end with this. When you drive off, you're emotional, and you said that so well, probably the most eloquent way that it's been explained thus far in the podcast. When you drive off, you're emotional because it's an end of a chapter that feels closer than family. Because the stuff that we go through together on deployments is stuff we'd never wish to go through with our families, because we kind of go through hell in deployments, then we come home. But these men and women that we serve these brothers and sisters that we serve with as well, we go through that bonding experiences that can never be taken away, that you can not talk to someone for 5 years and pick up the phone and it's like you never stop talking. And that's,
yeah.
And you're emotional because you're driving away from that and you don't know what's waiting for you on the other side, yet you're hopeful because you no longer have to wake up at 0500 and do PT.
Unless you're an entrepreneur.
Unless you're
in some time.
Right. But as an entrepreneur, I'll tell you something. Here's my secret entrepreneurial I don't know about you, Stefan, but this is mine. I like to work out midday. I start my day at 0530 and I'll work straight. I work in 90-minute sprints. So I do 90 minutes. I take a 10-minute, make myself a cup of coffee. If I need to use the head, I'll use the head. If I want to just take a walk, clear my head, do a quick phone call. And I work 90-minute sprints. And then midday, I stop. I work out. I have a boxing bag. I've got a home gym right outside my studio in my office. And I do that for about half an hour, 40 minutes. I have a shower down here and a full kitchen. I never have to leave my basement. I could literally live here all day long. And if I can shower, I can, refresh myself and continue with my day and work again until 2100 easily. And working out in the middle of the day, by the way, beats the midday lag. Just an FYI.
I'm a nighttime guy. Like my best workouts and actually the best work that I generally do historically has always been between about 12:30 and 2 in the morning. I know it doesn't make sense. That's my go time.
No, it does. It does. It absolutely does. I knew one of the most genius people I've met in my career was a guy who would show up to the office at 9 p.m. and work until 8 a.m. and then go home.
If it works, it works.
Whatever your process is, as long as you're delivering results, who cares?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much. We are out of time. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun on this episode. I was inspired because, eloquently speaking, the idea of walking away from the service in that moment you sign off and drive off is a very, very difficult moment and one that's life-changing and career-changing as well. And so Stefan explained it just magnificently. That's it for us here today, folks. I'm wearing my Wounded Warrior hoodie today. I don't know if you guys can see that, but please, if you're looking to donate, it's the end of the year, and you're feeling charitable, look for the many veteran foundations that are out there and support them financially. They definitely need to help. Our country hasn't gone to war in 4 years. We haven't started any new wars, but don't let that make you forget the fact that we still have veterans that are still recovering from the wars of the last 70, 80 years in our nation's history. We've typically started a new war, several wars a decade. And so this might be the first decade, and I think it is the first decade that we have not gone into any new wars, and hopefully that'll stay that way, and we can find where our military becomes a deterrence and not an attacker, and our brothers and sisters can stay healthy. But if you are looking to donate somewhere, Wounded Warrior Project, donate to them on their website. It's in the link below. That's it for us here today. Again, folks, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. Happy holidays. Happy Thanksgiving to you all. Stay healthy, folks, and stay cyber safe.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.